So thank you for being here. Today we'll be talking about how Waitrose, UK's leading supermarket chain, is making its wine portfolio more sustainable with a forward-thinking strategy. To do so, we have two people on this panel. I'll let them introduce themselves, but here is Barry Dick and then Clem Yates. So my first question is very easy. Can you please introduce yourself and explain us what you do?
Hi, my name is Barry Dick. I'm the sourcing and sustainability manager for Waitrose supermarket in the UK. I'm a master of wine. I've spent my time between winemaking and working for big wine brands and working for retail. And as I say, I'm currently working for Waitrose on their sustainability strategy, which is what we're here to discuss today. But that's me.
Thank you. And Clem?
I'm Clem Yates. I'm also a Master of Wine. I've spent my career making and sourcing wines for the UK off-trade. I consult to several companies around the world, and I really support the sustainability drive that's going on in the UK at the moment.
Thank you. For context, maybe can you just, please, Barry, explain us what position does Waitrose occupy in the wine market in UK?
Just quickly, in broad kind of commercial terms, we're about 6% of the market in BWS, but we over-index, which means we sell more wine kind of than the rest of the other categories. So we're on about 8% of share of the market for wine. We're really a premium wine retailer. A lot of our customers are really interested in quality, great service, and notably for this conversation, really interested in the ethics and the sustainability of what we do as a business and the products that we sell them.
Okay, so we're now talking about your strategy. Can you tell us about the project Loved and Found? That's the name you gave it, so what is it?
Look, the Loved and Found project really was born out of an overall strategy to reduce things like our carbon footprint and use more sustainable materials overall in the wine category. We're doing lots of other things like lightweighting our glass bottles. We're moving more wine around the world in bulk. But specifically for the Loved and Found project, we really looked at cork as a very positive material from its sustainability credentials. It's got a positive carbon footprint as a piece of material. When we looked at our wine range, our customers really like cork. We've got about 40% of the wines that we sell use cork. So clearly our customers like the material. They're really happy buying a bottle of wine with cork. So we just really wanted to, I think, push the boundaries, and some of learning about sustainability is about learning how the customer reacts and responds to changes in what they're being presented. So we really wanted to kind of push that, and we we're fortunate to have a really innovative wine range called Loved and Found, which focuses on really interesting grape varieties from all around the world that the customer might not have seen before. We've got I'm a master of wine, and we were doing a tasting this week, and there's grape varieties in there I've never heard of, mostly from Italy and Portugal. So we got some really fun things in there. So it's a very experimental range. And it's got quite a nice design which suited a cork, and we also wanted to look at a no capsule position as well, which meant that we would remove some single-use plastic off the market. And by doing these things, I think we're challenging the industry, so we're possibly challenging the capsule makers to think about their materials they use. So we're quite happy to put pressure on and nudge the industry, as well as present a slightly different offer to our customers. So we've got a range now that are all cork, no capsule, and as I say, allied to this position with interesting grape varieties, it's been really successful. And we were able to, as I say, reduce our carbon footprint and reduce half a ton of single-use plastic out of our kind of supply chain.
How many wines are we talking about? So
we'll move to a total position of about 12 SKUs, as we call them, or 12 different wine brands on the shelf, and they're all sold together, so it's quite impactful proposition at the moment.
Are you planning to develop this, or are you done?
So look, I think this range has been, as I say, it's been really well received. We've certainly shown a different kind of position to our customers, so we're learning a lot about how they respond and what they think. So we're gathering that feedback. And then we want to start to tie it up into other programs. We're looking at, how do we get those corks back from customers? So there's lots of other things we can start to kind of bring together under the umbrella of doing, having a more sustainable wine range at Waitrose.
Okay. Are those wines labeled differently? Do they have a loved and found label on the bottle? Or?
Yeah, correct.
Yes,
yeah.
so it's
yeah.
packaged specifically for this range. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's very interesting to see a leader like Waitrose going in this strategy. Clem, can you tell us how you see this going? I mean, what signal does all these evolutions, like we see in Waitrose, sending to the wine industry in France specifically? What do they need to hear about these changes? Is it just gadget, cosmetical, or is it a profound change that are coming?
We have to make profound changes to become sustainable. I think one of the dangers in the BWS category is that we're quite slow to recognise some of the issues that we have. We rely on agriculture for our industry, and climate change and the temperature change is, people are seeing that in the vineyards and the wine styles that we're seeing today. So if we don't make a change towards the end product, we are going to be really struggling to grow grapes in the future. It's as simple as that. And so from my perspective is that we have to start making some decisions in terms of what is the most sustainable packaging we can offer to consumers and almost lead the market. So with someone like Waitrose, it's a great opportunity to demonstrate how you can actually lead these sustainability initiatives. I think using cork as a sustainable product, part of my role is to try and educate people about the production of cork and how we've got past the issues of TCA taint, because we've all grown up in the wine industry from the time when TCA was a real issue. The development and the techniques and the ranges of closures available today hopefully negates the threat of TCA. From a consumer perspective, I think they identify cork as a real sort of premiumization opportunity. The icon wines are sealed with cork, and so it's something that can really be used to differentiate your category and really appeals to consumers, and also millennials prefer cork. So there's huge opportunity for the category to actually become more sustainable, but actually, with real positives to the end product and the consumer value at the end of the day.
Okay. What does taking off the capsule make? What difference does it make for the consumers and also for the global impact? Is it detail or is it something big?
So again, that's really what we want to test and learn. We want to try. The capsule looks nice. It really kind of finishes the bottle. It was put on there initially, to keep pests and away from wines in a dusty old damp cellar. Wines are not stored in dusty old damp dirty cellars anymore. So it's really there from a purely aesthetic point of view.
Tradition.
And tradition, which there's lots of tradition obviously wound up in wine, but as Clem says, unless we take risk, unless we try things that are different and new, and we show our wine consumers a way that they can still keep enjoying wine whilst doing so in a more sustainable manner. I think we've all got to take those risks. We've all got to try really hard to figure out ways that we can do it. And if taking a capsule off a bottle and seeing if a customer is quite happy to buy that is another way that we can drop and reduce using some single-use plastic, it's worthwhile doing.
Is it really a risk? Sorry to ask, but just removing the capsule doesn't seem so complicated, but still it's a risk because traditions?
Yep, no, if you speak to lots of brand owners in this room, they would all be quite nervous about removing their capsule from their bottles. Okay. So we were a little bit nervous as well, so we really want to find it out. And I think if you, use design well, if you use bottles well, if you use, a really lovely designed cork that it looks very appealing, there's ways for us to kind of just be creative and find new ways, as I say, to sell wine in a sustainable way that still looks and feels very appealing.
Creative is the key word, maybe. Okay. What are the new the next developments? What are the next move you can maybe tell us about, or you cannot?
Look, I think a sustainable wine range is not going to be one single silver bullet that is going to fix everything. It's going to be a combination of initiatives. You know, some of them are creative. You know, we're working on moving as much wine as we can, and, you know, using bulk shipment if that is done so in a more, you know, if it really helps to reduce the carbon footprint, especially from faraway places. We took quite a brave move to change as many of our small glass bottles into cans. So using lighter weight alternative formats, as we call them, is another way for us to, you know, reduce our carbon footprint and present something that is more sustainable to the customer. We sell a lot of organic and, you know, biodynamically produced wines, so, you know, keeping those front and center of our consumers' mind, to show them that that's a sustainable way to produce wine in the vineyard. So, you know, there's lots of different things all together, and glass lightweighting that I mentioned at the beginning. All of these things together can really start to make a big difference in, you know, putting together a more sustainable wine range. And we've got technology coming down the track, you know, where you can start to produce glass, for example, using renewable energy sources. So that's super exciting. So as I say, there's a bunch of things going on, and we've just got to understand as much of this. I mean, I always say I've spent a lot of my career learning about wine, and I'm now spending a bunch of time trying to learn about materials, energy sources, and it feels that a lot of us are having to develop these new skills and understanding that we can then, you know, produce great wines, great branding in a sustainable manner. And I think it's great that we're all kind of putting our heads together, doing this, you know, and learning these new skills. It's brilliant.
That's why we're all here. Clem, can you tell us, in your opinion, in your position, what is a more complicated change, the customers' habits or the producers' habits?
That's a difficult question.
Or both.
I think we have to lead. It's a very complicated message to get across to the consumer, and I think a consumer doesn't necessarily see wine as you know, unsustainable product. You know, it has a very kind of natural look and feel. Everyone's kind of, you know, perfect idea of a vineyard and producing your own wine. And I think we have to be quite careful not to damage that joy and love of the wine category. But we need big brand owners and retailers to get on board with using a more sustainable method of putting the wine on the shelf to the consumer, whether that be bulk shipping, looking at sustainable packaging, alternative formats. You know, there's not one silver bullet, as Barry said, to doing this. But as a category, there are so many options to make a wine range more sustainable. And I think in the UK, certainly data shows that people are really environmentally conscious. You know, they want to make sure that they are trying to live as an environmentally sort of, you know, green life as possible.
Which is not easy.
It's not easy. I drive an electric car and regret that massively as I sit there charging it for hours by the side of the road. But, you know, in the wine category, you're giving people a choice, and you're giving them, you know, excitement and innovation. Sustainability shouldn't be, you know, oh God, you know, we've got to be sustainable. It should be exciting. It should, you know, people should innovate around the subject and, you know, bring it to life for the consumer, and bring them on that journey to protect our industry. At the end of the day, we're doing this so we can still grow the grapes and still make the fabulous wine that we all enjoy drinking. But without those big changes and without those big corporations on board, we're not going to get there quickly enough, is my worry.
Okay. Did you ever think about reusable bottles? Sorry, I have my own topic. But we spoke about it earlier in another panel about reusable bottle in France. So what about in UK? How is it going with that?
Look, it's a really great question. Waitrose have made an ambition for all of our own label, for example, across other categories, you know, like veg we obviously sell lots of other food items. So we made a commitment. All of our own label, for example, will be reusable, recyclable, or home compostable. So, you know, we're very focused on that as an ambition. There's obviously certain limitations within the wine category, but, you know, we're certainly very keen. And as I said in our kind of discussion earlier, our door is really open, because glass is obviously a fantastic reusable material. I think, you know, some of the estimates would say that we could reuse a glass bottle 15 to 20 times. So glass obviously presents an opportunity to do that. As a retailer, our kind of core skill is, you know, selling great products to our customers. You know, we need the industry to put together the infrastructure that would make it, you know, economically sustainable for us to do, and, you know, the practicalities of being able to, you know, use reused bottles. But we would be more than happy to look at a concept that proposed something that had the infrastructure and the support there to do it. We would love to do it.
Another field to explore. Are there any questions you want to ask to Waitrose or Clem? Yates? Yes.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Barry. Hi, Clem.
Hello.
You talk about moving as much wine in bulk as possible for UK bottling. Now, I know that for I don't like the New World term, but for wine that comes from far away, that makes complete sense. When we talk about European producers, you know as well as I do, that their business model is based on the margin made on a bottled product. So selling in bulk is just not economically viable for a small premium or mid-range producer. How are you proposed to deal with that?
Yeah, funny. I was in Montreal a few weeks ago. We're having a similar conversation. You know, so the message to producers in Europe and say France, you know, in this example, we're not certainly going to start selling or buying all of our wine on a bulk basis, because there's a few principles that are just sensible principles at play. We need to have, say, a couple of containers per annum of volume, so that's 50,000 litres per annum for a brand. And some of the studies have shown that the carbon footprint really only starts to make sense at the outermost reaches of Europe into the UK. So you're really looking at what we call the deep sea countries of New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Chile, Argentina, and California. That makes a lot of sense from a carbon footprint point of view. And as I say, and then on top of that, if you consider that you need to be, you know, working with a brand that's got minimum 50,000 litres of turnover, that obviously limits, you know, where you do that from. So we want to do stuff that makes sense from a carbon footprint point of view, and also, as you say, makes commercial sense.
I think also sustainability, we have to think of the total holistic picture with human sustainability as well. You know, the business, taking business away from a supplier and the jobs, you know, in a bottling hall, and the money that goes into that, you know, mainly rural locations. You know, we have to look at sustainability as a complete picture and not just carbon reduction initiatives, because the human element is, you know, equally as important within a supply base.
I've got two questions, please. One is, we talk a lot about sustainability in wine and a lot of initiatives to do with wine and alternative packaging for wine, but I wondered if you're working on anything with spirits. And the second question is, what do you think the BWS shelves in Waitrose will look like in 10 years' time?
Good question. So spirits, first off, the answer is yes. Spirits volumes are obviously sometimes not as big. So there's, as I say, there's kind of practical considerations. I think spirits are probably wedded quite a lot to heavy glass bottles. So I think that's probably, you would look at that and go, that's one of the real issues that spirits has got to manage. You know, can we do a version of lightweighting with spirits? It's quite tough because a lot of it is based around, you know, very unique branding and the bottle shape is a huge part of that. So I think that would be quite tricky. But I think there's materials that are, things like an aluminium cans and larger aluminium bottles certainly have potential, I think, for spirits. It's certainly an area that we haven't looked at a lot, if I'm quite honest. And I think it does look, as I say, there's probably even more tricky things to manage in spirits. So that's not a great answer to the first one, but I think we would definitely love to, but it looks more complicated. And the second question, 10 years' time. As I say, I think all those silver bullets that I've talked about. So the one thing that I don't think we've really cracked, for me, cans are a great solution to the small format. Bag-in-box is a really well-established, larger format solution. The one thing we really haven't cracked is a lightweight solution to 75 cl. And we're having a good look at the minute of some of those options. Again, there's quite a lot of complexity around economies of scale and production, being able to scale it up, and all of that, and the cost. And the kind of sometimes with a lot of these sustainability things, there's some pros and cons. So, for example, bag-in-box obviously using plastic, which isn't, is viewed quite negatively, but the cardboard's great, and you've got the tap. So, nothing, I always say no one solution is perfect. So in 10 years' time, I think we will definitely see some much more innovative packaging that is fun and easy to engage with, and actually has a really good result from a sustainability point of view. So I think we will have a much better mix of glass to other stuff. And I do think we will move into some quite exciting projects with, as I say, reusables. I think could become big. Whether what that looks like, whether we've got a Waitrose place that we all go to, and you take your bottles and you fill them up. So I think that could be quite exciting. That but how you bring that into our current estate, as we call it, into current. So I think that could be reusables, could be a big chunk. Glass being made in a really environmentally friendly way could be super. And then the alternative formats. I think that's kind of what we'll get to, which is a real mix of how we consume wine in different formats and manners. I can really see that happening. So, but I think the big thing for me is going to be information. So as Clem said, this is really quite complex. And if you're a consumer, you don't want to get your book out and figure out, what the pros and cons of all these. That's kind of my job. So I think information that cuts through that complexity and tells the consumer, for example, the carbon footprint of this solution is X, and the carbon footprint of this solution is Y, and they can make an informed choice about that. And then I know we kind of disagree, but I think regen is really exciting. Organic and biodynamics very process heavy. Regen is just really, I find it really interesting, and I'm seeing some really great stories that are very easy to kind of communicate to customers about improved soil health and biodiversity. And so I think things that cut through that complexity, I think that will be really exciting. So the information that customers will get will be super exciting, and they can make really informed choices about all of those different formats and things I talked about, and the impact that that genuinely has on the planet. That, I think, is where we'll get to, is a combination of change of format and presentation plus information. Sorry for the long question or answer.
I think in 10 years' time, I wrote in one of my Master of Wine exams what the future of wine was, and I said that there was going to be a big flexi tank at the front of store and everyone filled up their bottles. I think you can make it look a lot nicer than that. But I think, when you think about what we've achieved with plastic bags, and everyone takes their own bags to the supermarket now, you've got them in your car. If everyone could purchase, a glass bottle or an aluminium bottle, and you fill it up from store. And I'm not saying, you're going to do that with fine wine or, take a present, but, if you're cutting, that carbon footprint, but by even about like 50% of purchases, you're dramatically changing the sustainability of the category. And people can do it, and there are opportunities to do that. So whilst the logistics is so complicated at a retail level to collect bottles and recycle them and reuse them, because obviously glass can be broken very easily, training the consumers and training us to take your own bottle to fill up with your favourite Pinot Grigio or Sauvignon Blanc, it's really achievable, because we've done it with plastic bags. And I think we can be much braver in the category and get the consumer to be a little bit more responsible for the packaging that they are using to buy the products.
Another question. Congratulations on the project. This Waitrose initiative is really nice. It's very innovative. We talked a lot about the packaging in this roundtable, but also sustainable wine starts in the vineyard, from the agriculture and so on. How can you convince the consumers who are constantly, especially in the crisis that we're living, wanting to spend less, to actually spend more for a more sustainable product?
Yeah, look, that's the ultimate. I heard a really great challenge. I heard a really great French quote, isn't it? The fin du monde and the fin du mois, which I just think sums up really well. And that's a lot of people's realities. And look, that's super tough. Because some of having a highly sustainable wine that was, say, bulk shipped and put into a bag-in-box. You're going to be selling a bag-in-box for 20 quid in the UK. So look, that's really, really hard, and I think that is that really is a reality we've got to try and kind of face up to. But yeah, not an easy solution.
Or maybe the consumer will want to spend money for sustainable wines only, and not for the other one anymore. No?
Sorry, I meant to give another kind of, I guess, anecdote or story, but I think we've got to convince the consumers. Maybe it is about consuming less wine, but some of the lovely anecdotes, as I say, things like regen farming that you hear. I was chatting to one lovely producer, and they've done an absolute mountain of work on the soil health and the change of that soil over years, and it's taken them a lot of time and effort. And then they can talk about stories around biodiversity, and they told a story about a hedgehog and the hedgehogs that came back into the vineyard, and they said the consumer reaction around the hedgehog was huge. And they said it was just amazing. All the consumers wanted to kind of hear about were the stories about the hedgehog, and they'd done all of this work in the vineyard that improved the soil health and the fungi and bacteria and worms, and but the one story that kind of cut through and got that emotional connection with the consumer was the bit about a hedgehog. So I think we will find stories that really engage and cut through the complexity and get people excited and willing to I think consider what they spend money on when they're buying a bottle of wine. So I think that's how we're going to have to convince people to spend a bit more.
Sorry, another question. When it comes to buying wine from a supermarket, I normally walk to my local Waitrose. But if I buy 12 bottles of wine, I'm not going to carry that home. So I tend to get that delivered. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about reusable bottles. Of course, you cannot use reusable bottles if you get the wine delivered to your home. Have you done calculations to find out what's most ecological, driving to the shop to buy your own wine or getting it delivered in a Waitrose van?
Look, I would love to have the answers to that, Anne. But I think what is exciting is coming up is, retailers, ourselves and others are going to what I'm sure is called Scope 3. So we're moving to a place where the information that we've got on everything is really transparent. And then we can start to make really strategic decisions about, do we do more bulk shipment of this place to that place? Is that the right thing to do? Because we've got the information and the data to allow us to make a decision as a retailer. And I think you as a consumer will also have great information to figure that out as well. And you can, we can start to model it. Because when you speak to the guys who are doing all the carbon footprint, they talk about aggregated data. So the more that we do this, and we're all doing this, because we're all kind of, it's not new news that Anne is going from your house down to the Waitrose shop, which is X miles away, to pick up, 12 bottles of wine. So as we have all of this great information and we're sharing it and we've got visibility, you can make great decisions about living a very sustainable life. I can make great decisions about having the best sustainable wine range at Waitrose. And we've just got this fantastic set of information. We're a little, I think we're definitely a number of years away from that, but you know, we're putting pressure on our supply base to give us that understanding. Other retailers are doing the same. I know, speaking to the Systembolaget and Whole Foods in America, all the retailers, we're all getting together to say, look, we've got to understand this so we can make great decisions about what is the right thing to do.
Do you think that there's a danger of traditional appellations that insist on rules around bottling within the appellation are going to get left behind by supermarkets and shops, retailers that want to be more sustainable and therefore want to bring in more bulk stuff?
I think yes. I think it's happening. The Systembolaget is already in Sweden, for example. You know, they put pressure on certain regions to say, look, we want to sell your wine, but we want to put it in a bag-in-box, for example, because we believe that is, you know, a lighter weight solution. And some regions have come to the party and said, okay, we'll change, but there are obviously some who, you know, and Quebec, yeah. So it's absolutely happening. And I think, you know, these traditional regions are going to have to, you know, also face the same challenges that we're all facing, which is how do we, you know, do this in a more sustainable way. So I think there will be some who drag their feet and don't want to move into a lighter weight bottle. You know, they've got big, heavy embossed bottles, and who will just move slower. My attitude is that we've got to take a leadership position and we've got to crack on, and work with the, you know, the brands and the regions who do want to kind of get along and help us push in the right direction, and those more traditional ones will just be left behind. And I think they will have less opportunity going forward, because this is going to become a huge part of our buying decisions. It is going to be about how much does that cost, but also what's the, you know, what's the environmental impact. And if they don't want to play, they're going to lose. They're just going to lose market.
I think we have to be careful in terms of, we were talking earlier about sort of percentage weight of range, and I think we have to be careful from a category point of view to not all go down the same path and still offer choice and differentiation on shelf. You know, there are a lot of consumers out there that recognise the, you know, the Chateauneuf de Pape bottle, you know, it's their go-to wine. But I do think that, you know, within the region, people have to look at how you produce that more sustainably. I don't think jumping straight into a bag-and-box, you know, and having everything in a 390-gram bottle is going to turn the consumer on at all, and we're in fact going to put people off the category. So I think there's an extra challenge in that, how you become more sustainable but still keep that differentiation that we have within the category, which is really important.
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, that would be my feel too, is that, you know, we just got to improve the position, you know, whatever that is. You know, the bag-and-box example was probably a bit extreme, but you know, as I say, as long as I was speaking to the Champagne CIVC, and they're also doing work to, you know, to lightweight there. You know, they're obviously starting from quite a heavy position. They're also doing some work to move, and you know, that's really encouraging. But yeah, I think as long as we're all moving there, it's good.
Well, I was going to ask a question, but after your question is more of a comment than an actual question, I think. My point was, okay, sustainability has so many angles, and they're all important, but one of them certainly has to do with agricultural communities and how they play into all of this. Because let's face it, every city in the world has too many people, and all the countryside in the world does not have enough people, no matter where you go. And Loved and Found, to circle back a little bit to the beginning of the conversation, makes a distinct bet in picking up grapes that are not very well known. And those grapes tend to be grown in smaller communities than the Chardonnay that goes to the next $2.99 Chardonnay on sale at one of your competitors. So here's a comment. I mean, that's absolutely fundamental that you do that. You started with, I believe in the beginning was 4 wines, now you're up to 12. So clearly that is a bet that pays off and kind of demystifies a bit the idea that, well, I cannot be sustainable and profitable, and maybe you're changing things on its head and say, to be profitable, I have to be sustainable.
Thanks, Carlos.
Hello. So we've spoken a lot about packaging. What other metrics are used for sustainability outside of packaging when you look for new suppliers, for example, of wine?
Can you give me an example? What do you mean?
So do you look for what kind of practices the winemakers use in the field, for example? I know Waitrose is a premium supermarket. As a winemaker, I'd want to know, what can I do to get into a space that interests you other than putting my wine in a plastic bag, for example?
Yeah, look, things obviously that stand out. For example, we've got over 100 organic wines, so our customers really clearly engage with organic as a badge or a certification. So those certifications do obviously help. I know that they cost a bit of money to get, and they require a bit of work. But things that allow our customers to kind of spot something that is made in a much more sustainable way, like organics or biodynamics, certainly do that. So yeah, we absolutely look at wines that have those call-outs to help sell them really. But apart from that, we're seeing a few brands that use a carbon footprinting. So there's a couple that declare what their carbon footprint is on the brand. So that we're starting to see a little bit of that. As I say, that's very different from the sustainable vineyard kind of proposition. But I think we're starting to kind of look and see all of those things being demonstrated from the producers, and then we can talk to our customers about that.
Thanks very much. Actually, it was a question around the consumer, and I guess looking at the move from New World to shipping in bulk and the journey of the last 20 years, moving to bulk gave an environmental benefit, but it also gave a cost benefit, and that was helpful to both retailer and consumer. I think you can see the same if you lightweight the glass, you can see the same if you take the capsule off the bottle. Those are all journeys where you're essentially reducing the cost, and that's helping the environment. How far will the consumer go when you put the price up to further that journey? And what are the rubs for Waitrose? You've got access to some fantastic shoppers who might, you explained at the beginning your profile of shopper, who might go further. So from a Waitrose perspective and maybe more widely, Clem?
From a Waitrose, well, it's really, I mean, when you think about legislation, and government may take a view on carbon, and they may tax it, so that might come from a government point of view. Could we charge more for a wine that has got a really low carbon footprint? That's really interesting. So not sure how that would kind of go. So I'm not sure I can really help answer that one, Rich, but. Yeah, I think once we build value to the customer in these things, then it starts to have relevance, and I think that can get quite exciting. But at the minute, if we've got one brand that's got a carbon footprint number on it and nobody else has, then you haven't got a relative position to kind of sell an improvement. So that's hard. I do see a day, a point in time where everything has got a carbon footprint on it. We've got all the clarity around what's the impact in the vineyard. As I say, everything's about pros and cons. So, a wine that is amazingly sustainable in the vineyard, but then, is transported in a big heavy bottle and ends up on the shelf. So I think having an ability to view that whole picture together, I think if we can do that with comparables across the whole range, then I think you're in a place where you can go, well, there you go. There's an amazingly, produced wine in a highly sustainable way that's got a low carbon footprint. So I do think the customers would see value in that, and whenever that starts to become a monetary value, I would hope, they would just go and buy more of that product would be the ultimate answer, which, you would normal economics would allow you to charge a bit more. So I hope we get there.
I think it's very difficult in the UK because we have so many other factors that influence price, such as duty. And I think at the moment, sustainability within the category has to be done without affecting the price, because consumers are very sensitive to obviously price increases, and with the cost of living crisis, we will see probably a faster decline if we start charging more money for more sustainable products. I think where the innovation comes in is that people have to think about how do I make this product and how do I make it more sustainable without adding cost on. Now, whether that's from a production point of view, a logistic point of view, servicing point of view, I think there are solutions out there that doesn't result in cost increases. And I certainly don't think that sustainability should come at a price for the consumer. They should be able to buy more sustainable products at a similar price or the same price that they were buying the same product that was slightly less sustainable. I think that's achievable within the retail sector.
I was going to make one more point, Rich. Actually, the thing you said at the beginning is really interesting. And when you talk to producers who are really starting to do regen farming and they're looking at the carbon footprint, you know, there's a lot of talk about how this is like a proxy for efficiency. So by understanding your system, you're able to, figure out what is those inputs that do add cost. And if we can get to a place where we're able to do all of that, and as you say, and that actually makes things more efficient and better produced and a healthier soil and more resilient, I think then that you're in a world where that makes a lot of commercial sense as well as a lot of environmental sense, and that's kind of where I hope we get to.
Very quickly, a question about certifications. There's more and more happening, obviously, in terms of certification for sustainability in wine. It starts, obviously, from the wine production, organic, biodynamic, and so on, and then goes to sustainability certifications like Viva in Qualitas, these kind of things. You were talking about indicating the carbon footprint also on the label. How do we manage this and not confuse the consumer? And what are the certifications which you would judge are most relevant today to the consumers?
That's like the $1 million question at the minute, isn't it? As I say, there's a lot of certifications available. They cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time and resource and people to do that. And as I say, when we've got a myriad of different certifications, as well as we're asking, potentially suppliers now to look and understand their carbon footprint and all of their packaging, and we're asking a lot. And I'm especially very mindful that we are asking, the producers a lot. So, we're doing things like with the SWR, we're trying to get together and be, from our side, be as efficient as possible and really mindful about what we're asking the supply base to do. But it is super complicated, and I know I've talked to producers, and, it is difficult for them to pay for all the certifications and understand which ones have relevance. They're making business decisions about which certifications that they invest in. And I appreciate that is really hard because it's not clear to the customer, and it definitely is a space that we're all learning about what has cut through. And as I say, I think when I see things like being able to just have a number that says the carbon footprint on this product is this, I think that helps to cut through the complexity. But this is certainly like we're all having to learn like how this is all going to go. And we've got lots of competing, companies wanting to offer certification, and they see a business opportunity. So, without some clear kind of government direction, and also some direction from retailers, we're going to have to just figure this out as we go along. We're just asking a question about regen. So regen's obviously a newer concept, and it's going through the same kind of growing pains about having a certification and what that's going to look like and what the standards are, and is it equivalent from, the US to Europe, and so again, that's going to enter into a similar kind of process of, has it got value? How much does it cost? So look, I understand that's hard.
Guys, my question was about whether you look at other sectors and how they're successful in sustainability. So you go and you drop 400, 500, 600 euros on a Patagonia Gore-Tex jacket, or or whatever one it is. That sector has been able to do it. Shoes, in general, have been able to do it, if it's Visa trainers or whichever it is. So I'm wondering how we all in the wine industry learn how to do what they've done. And then a second question on that is the incorporation of technology, which is invading our lives very, very fast. But augmented reality, things like that. I don't know whether I should use Chateauneuf du Pape because we're in France, but could you actually show bottles all the time with that crest, but not actually have them in store? Is there a way of doing that?
And I'm definitely a bit of a technophobe, so I'll struggle on your second question, Alex. But what I love about working for a retailer is, I bump into the guys in the meat team or, the pizza team, and what are you guys up to? Like, what's relevant for you, and what are your big companies that they work with, showing interest in? So that's why, things like regen. When I see Unilever and Nestle putting in a head of regen for Nestle, we're investing in a team at Waitrose to really look at regen. Agriculture, as I say, because it's been promoted by some of these big FMCG companies, as we all know, the wine industry is a very fragmented industry. We don't have big budgets for communication, and as we talked about, changing consumer behaviour is hard and often takes quite a lot of money to talk to consumers about why they should change their buying behaviour. So when you see big companies getting involved in something like regen, I kind of go, well, that's super interesting. We're seeing it on McCain's frozen chips, for example, a little logo, talking about what that means. So I think there's a huge opportunity when we do get things that go across categories, like B Corp is another one, and I think when our customers see that reassurance being given to a wine and, a box of cereal and some trainers, I think that really starts to have relevance. So I think the less complexity to the previous question we've got around certification, I just think we've got to be really careful which horses we back, as a retailer and as brands. And there's got to be a little bit of collaboration between us if we're going to do it in an effective way, and with a little bit of clarity to the customer. So I agree with you. I think things that go across, the whole market are really interesting, and I think the wine industry should be a little bit more, willing to kind of get involved in those.
I think that's from a corporate perspective, obviously, they're going to have to take a leadership in this, and things like the Sustainable Wine Roundtable, which is a cross-industry initiative where we can learn from countries like, the Nordics, who are, much more environmentally conscious than us. We can share and learn and sort of lead the industry by learning from each other. We're not going to do it in isolation. Because obviously it's a global issue, and I think some countries are much better at it than others. So I think those sorts of initiatives from a wine industry perspective are really important, because we are going to have to learn from each other and from other categories, as you mentioned. I think we've got to get better at recycling. It's recyclable, but is it recycled? There's that huge issue there. And so I think, from an industry point of view, we've got to push back, on governments, and get the recycled material actually recycled for a start. There are various issues that as an industry we can champion and actually fix quite easily, but, that there are probably fixable solutions out there. In terms of AI, I think that's the innovation part of it, in terms of augmented reality, how artificial intelligence can help us, in, as you say, a hologram of a wine bottle in a wine aisle. It's very, sort of futuristic, but we've got to look to that to keep the energy alive as well, because it is a very dry, complex topic. And the last thing we want to do is put consumers off buying a bottle of wine because we're more sustainable. That's the last thing we want to happen.
Hi. It's great that there's been 2 strong initiatives from Waitrose, Loved and Found and Canned for Good. Watch those really closely. Excellent. We've been talking a lot about what consumer reaction there would be, but surely the numbers are already in, Barry, and you should be able to share with us a little bit in terms of what issues have you faced. I mean, if somebody buys a can, does it bleed into the margin of a full bottle sale in another category, or is it working, isn't it working? Could you share a few insights with us?
Yeah, look, I always thought, and Jamie's here as well, when we were putting this together, we had to make it exciting. It couldn't just be about the format. So we had to, focus on a great range that was exciting, that looked good, and we had to put it in the right place. And one of the things we've definitely found with cans, which is, I think makes it quite an exciting category is by putting it by RTD, so a gin and tonic in a can and a mojito. Like we've all of a sudden kind of brought it into like an occasion and a solution, and that's got great clarity to the customer about what we are really saying that this product is to be, you know, used for or enjoyed. So that has definitely worked, putting it in the right place alongside comparable products that are used in the same manner with, you know, a great range and exciting brands. That all starts to work. So in terms of the commercials, what we definitely found was when we moved from glass to can, when there was a comparable brand in glass bottle and in can, there was a little bit of a dip off as customers, I think, you know, obviously had a little bit of a, you know, a little moment of thought and went, not sure about this. But then we've seen really good engagement coming back in. You know as well as I do that, you know, a can is really great for wine quality. It can actually be really beneficial. And cans are, you know, used in lots of other categories. So there was always a feeling that customers overall, our customers are happy to buy a can, whether it's a can of soft drink or a gin and tonic. So I think we've just hopefully moved them into a world where a wine is just as acceptable as a can of soft drink. So that's what we're finding, and I think that's been quite exciting. So I think that's kind of as much as does that answer your question? That sort of feels like we've got to a good place on that.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you very much.